Howdy. Today we're talking about working from home. So you might have noticed of late there's been a lot of talk about the future of work and how working from home is going to change absolutely everything. Several weeks ago at this point, Twitter announced that it was going to allow its entire workforce to be able to work from home. But I'd like to talk about a few things that haven't sort of been mentioned in the working from home discussion and why I don't think it's the sort of silver bullet that everyone seems to think it is. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg made a similar announcement shortly thereafter, but mentioned that his employees would have to take a pay cut if they wanted to work from home on an ongoing basis and lived in a low cost of living area. So for those of you thinking you could take your sweet Silicon Valley salary and move to low cost of living bumfuck nowhere and live in a mansion, that's not really the case. Which sort of begs the question, like, why? If the value you're providing to the company is the same, no matter where you are, which for someone who works in a software company, it almost always is, then why would the location of where you live make any difference as to how much you should be paid for that? Lots of businesses are showing how super forward-thinking they are in advertising roles for online only and things like that. And this might be one of the things that helps us get through the pandemic, no doubt. But when we talk about the future of work, aren't we then really saying that what we're actually talking about is you as someone providing labor are competing against a pool of people that is now much larger? You're not just a person working at a software company in Geelong and you've got the local Geelong talent pool to compete against. Now you're competing against everyone in that time zone. You're competing against people in Geelong, in Melbourne, in Sydney, in Brisbane, in the ACT. Anyone that's within plus or minus 2 hours time zone is now in a position to take your job as well. And don't get me wrong, I'm not some kind of anti-globalization isolationist, no trade, Trumpian type, believe me. But there is a problem with globalization in that the people who seem to be most affected tend to be the ones at the bottom of the pile. And if now we are competing on a global level for marketing work in Malvern, that's going to put downward pressure on wages, as we've already seen. And the problem with that kind of globalization is if you're attracting work from places like India or China, where the cost of living is substantially lower and the labor is done on, shall we say, coerced conditions.
Slave labor.
Then someone who's expecting a middle-class life here in Australia or any other Western country is going to get priced out of the market. For example, we've seen this happen in a bunch of industries already. Take 99 Designs or Fiverr, the places where you can go and get work, which was high-grade professional graphic designers. You can now get people in India and China competing for these kinds of jobs for $5, $10. Graphic designer here in Australia, up until very recently, was making very good money. Or at least acceptable money, I don't know. But apparently it wasn't a laughable career choice 10 years ago. You might think, benefits of working from home far outweigh the negatives. Yeah, I'll take a bit of a pay cut, but if I can move out in the country somewhere and buy a nice plot of land, instead of inner city Melbourne, where I have to pay $900,000 for a piss-stained cardboard box that's within 30 kilometres of the city, that might be a trade that I'm willing to make. Plus you get all that time commuting back, you know, an hour a day, twice a day, that's 10 hours a week that I can be spending with my family, flexibility to go and pick up the kids. These are things that people really want. And that's fair enough. Those are reasonable things. I think it's more evidence of how gross our workplace culture has been up until this point that, you know, childcare and long commute times were sort of dismissed as being trivial concerns because they were those of the workers. But that aside, I don't really think that in our culture, in our current culture where we, you know, work more and more and more, that a gift of 10 hours a week is necessarily going to be freely given from these large corporations for you to just invest in your own mental health and doing yoga and working out. If anything, I think the expectation will then become, okay, well, seeing as you don't have to commute, you don't need to work 8 until 6, you can work 7 until 8. You don't need to commute. You can give me an extra 10 hours of work a week. And the excuse is going to be what exactly as to why you can't? To conclude, I think working from home is necessary. When surveyed, a lot of people want to work from home. sometimes. Almost nobody wants to work from home all the time. And there are things that we get from a workplace like socialization and culture and getting a vibe of what the company is actually like, talking to coworkers, feeling connected in a way that just doesn't really translate well to Zoom. And I fear that if we make a transition to working from home, we're going to lose a lot of that stuff that makes a workplace good and fun and special to be at. So yeah, working from home is great, but I guess be wary. Anytime you hear something being described as a cure-all or a panacea, always be skeptical, because if there's one thing I've learned about large corporations, it's that there are no free lunches. You don't get any easy wins. Anyway, would love to hear your opinion about this, guys. If some of you have been working from home, what that experience has been like for you, what your thoughts and feelings about it are, leave them in the comments below. And as always, love your faces. We'll see you in the next video. Peace. Hope I was in focus that whole time, honestly. Thinking I might buy a ranch. Saw a couple of design blogs, so live off the land, you know.